Blood money. As children, we are told that we all are unique in our way of talents and passions. Not everyone is going to have greatness in the same dream. Rather, you dream of a simple life where you work a normal job and have a family, while others want more out of life, like riches and fame. I never stopped to think about these lessons until recently. Most of my life I was poor. Barely did my family have food or clothes on our backs. We had a home, but it wasn't the greatest, so at a young age I started my life of crime. At first it was stealing from small stores or local food places in order to provide my family with what we needed. But as I got older, my skills of being a thief started to get better. I could break into homes and bigger businesses, taking whatever I choose. This was my talents, you could say. My parents didn't know how or why, but I guess it was lucky for me that they never seemed to notice my nightly walks. It wasn't until high school my father started to clue in on my habits, the sudden new clothes in the closets or cabinets full of food he remembered not buying with his checks. I had a good reason for stealing. Well, at first, then it became an addiction: money, jewelry, cars, and other items I couldn't live without. My first time in jail was when I turned 19. My neighbor caught me stealing from his home, and the police arrived, and my father wasn't far behind. Now you think I learned my lesson, right? Hell no, I did my time, and when I came home my parents had kicked me out while I was still behind jail. My life on the streets started the day I came home. "There is no saving that boy," my father yelled, throwing my stuff into the lawn. My mother only cried while my two little sisters looked on confused. I had spent my first few nights cold and hungry. My mind was lost and I wanted to give up, but something kept me going. There was only one way in my mind to live without wanting. I would break into shops for food, and when my clothes got dirty or old, well, I'd just go get some. My life on the streets wasn't so bad. In fact, for the first couple years I would steal my way around the problem. It was so simple back then. I would pick a home and sneak in at night, and raid the kitchen quietly, and slept in the attic or basement. I even took a shower after the owner was gone and stole some clothes. I had done this for 3 months, moving from home to home so I wouldn't be caught in the act. But life decided to teach me another lesson. I was stupid and headed up for a shower one morning, not noticing the older woman in the kitchen. She seemed puzzled and confused, but then started to scream out. Everything went to hell as I tried to escape, but she held me at bay, standing her ground. "Get away from the door!" I yelled, grabbing the knife on the table, sending it into her chest. I panicked because this was the first time I had killed anyone, and yet something inside made me feel wonderful and happy. Of course I got away before the police showed up, but it did make me change my plans. I started to stay in homes that were up to sell. Easy to just sneak in through a window or back door. But my life was changed when I heard about an older woman in the newspaper who was needing help with little things around her estate. Of course I figured this woman had to be loaded with cash, and I knew then this would be the end of my problems. I cleaned myself up and got some new clothes. Heading into town, I started toward the large estate on the edge of town. The long walk up the drive made me look on and wonder, she really must have been living here for years, as the place seemed a bit aged. April Lancaster was indeed a friendly soul. She invited me inside her home and we talked about her needs. Of course I was too busy looking at the state of her home. I really knew my days of wanting were over. Just wondering, why not ask your family to help? She seemed taken by the question but smiled, offering me a drink as we sat down on the couch. She told me that her family was gone, and she was the only one. My eyes lit up. The old woman really had no one to miss her if she just happened to have an accident within her home. Either way, I accepted her offer and started my life in position as her helper to get things done. Within her old age, I knew I had finally gotten my answer, or so I thought. For the next few months I acted like a caring person, helping her. I would clean, cook, and even just keep her company, but there was something about her, I don't know what it was, but she seemed a bit different. "What about your family?" she asked one evening while sitting at the table eating. I told her a lie about how my family were hardworking and my father spent a lot of time on the road for his job. She seemed impressed by this. I spent much of the time hearing stories of her childhood and the illness that made it hard for her to do things on her own. She did pay me a little to help, of course, but my mind could only think about the big picture. In fact, I knew this would be too easy, but you know, when you were young, the risk didn't really cross your mind, and at the time Mrs. Lancaster was more than she seemed. I first started to see this in the manner of speaking and personality. She seemed to know when to use kindness to gain what she needed, and fear when she knew someone maybe was out of her control. This behavior started when she hired someone to repair and remodel the upstairs bathroom. She offered them drinks and even little sandwiches for all their hard work. She smiles and grins, making them feel safe. But every week I noticed there would be a new person to finish the job. I asked about this and she only just laughed. "They felt sick and sent a replacement," she said, smiling up at me. Now for a company to send new workers into a place where they were disappearing, that really started to make me wonder about Mrs. Lancaster. But that was just the beginning. My plan still held strong, as I knew the old woman didn't know what I had ready for her. That Tuesday morning I asked if I could go get some items from the store. Her sweet smile made me uneasy, but I was glad that I had some time out of the house. I took my time as I walked along the busy street, going over my plan in my head. I knew the best way to get rid of the old woman. Of course, I knew not to act so quickly on it. She seemed to be smarter than I was giving her credit. About mid-afternoon I had returned home and Mrs. Lancaster was sitting in front of her fireplace. She seemed to be on the phone. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew from her tone it was bad. I excused myself to the kitchen, knowing whatever was going on wasn't my problem. I started our lunch thinking about this place and how everything would belong to me. My plan seemed so simple, as it had been working so well, getting really close with her and seeing me as family and not just the hired help. "Lunch is ready," I smiled as I helped her to the table. Her grim look made me wonder, but I only sat down and let her eat. She even retired to her room early that night. Whatever happened over the phone really must have upset her. I explored the house late into the night, hoping to find any secrets or where she kept her money. She kept up the odd behavior for a couple weeks, requesting meals in her room and ensuring me she was just feeling ill. Either way, this wasn't a problem. After all, my plan to get close was working better each day. For the next few months I would care for her. "You're such a sweet person," she said one day while we sat looking into the forest from her backyard. April's health was fading, and this was good for me, or at least for my plans. What can I say? People overdose on their pills all the time, and with no living family, well, she would be crazy not to leave me this place. I continued to play my role of caregiver, knowing April trusted me totally. But my plan would fall apart when she told me what her plans were for this place. "What do you mean? I would hate to see your money and estate just disappear," I said, careful not to give myself away. April looked confused, but only for a moment, but gave me that same smile. "Oh dear, how sweet, but my house and money will always be mine." I didn't know what to say. For once in my life I feared her. I let her have peace and quiet that night, knowing I only had one choice: to kill her. The next day I decided to act on my new plan, preparing a meal. I added a bit of rat poison and other items and cooked it well, imagining the effect it would have on her. I had noticed my hand shaking as fear filled my mind. I barely had time to think as sweat rolled down my face. Something seemed off with April today. She had an odd smile on her face. Her skin seemed to have more color. "Lunch is ready," I said as I laid the plate down in front of her. She worried me, smelling the bite on her spoon before putting it into her mouth. I waited, but nothing happened. By now her body should have gone into shock, but she just kept eating it. My, whatever special ingredient you use, this is 5-star. I only nodded, excusing myself for a moment as panic raised into my chest. What the hell is going on? I freaked out once the bathroom door was locked. That woman downed half a box of rat poison and didn't even have a reaction. I tried to get a hold of myself, but terror seemed to have control over me. Are you okay? She called now from the other side of the door. I panicked knowing she shouldn't have been able to walk on her own, but here we were at this moment as I tried to make sense of everything. Let me in, dear, she called again, but this was an odd tone, like a deep demonic sound. I assured her that I was fine and I would be out soon. This seemed to work as she went back to finish her meal. I creeped past the dining room and started for the front door, but just as I reached it she now stood between my freedom and my fear began to rise. She laughed, locking the door before turning to me. Don't think I'm not onto you, she said with a twisted grin across her face. I don't even care about my plan. All I wanted to do is get the hell out of this insanity. I begged her to let me go, and I would never come back, but she only just laughed as her form began to change. Her body seemed to get thin and long as her hair fell to the floor. I was looking at a demon or maybe a monster, but my blood ran cold as she stared at me. I bolted down toward the first door I could find, almost falling down the basement stairs. The cold hallway had 3 doors, all which were locked, but it was strange black matter that covered the walls. In this moment I don't know what made me do this, but I reached up touching the black glue, only be met with the most horrifying image. A face stared back at me, stuck in a scream as vines went through their mouth and other parts of their face. The lights came to life as she stood in the hall, now just smiling before throwing me to the floor. A name tag caught my attention. Oh God, I looked up. Every repair guy was in the black glue. No wonder they just disappeared. I screamed out as she grabbed onto my leg, dragging me to a locked door. She played the lock, slowly getting it open. I found my strength and kicked her hard in the side. She gave out a scream and let me go. I ran up the stairs and out of that house as quickly as possible, later calling the police. They looked through the house and indeed found the bodies. What about Mrs. Lancaster? The cops looked confused before pulling me aside. They told only things they found was a torn dress and a trail of black glue going out the back door.